The Wife of Bath's Prologue, lines 395 to 502, and these give a breakdown of what we're going to look at today in our extract. So she says the men had a dreadful time, but they were flattered by her jealousy. She says God gave women skill to deceive effectively. Somehow or other she always managed to get the upper hand with her husbands and deceive them. She recounts how she would refuse marital relations until he had paid his ransom, his penalty, or ransom. She says if she were to make her will, her testament, she would have been repaid for all her behaviour. So it's quite thought-provoking when we think about women's treatment, that all of her deception, her flirtatiousness, her trickery has been repaid. That's quite a thought-provoking statement about how she must have been treated. She encourages her fourth husband to be like a sheep, docile and childlike. She says men are like Job, who in the Bible, Job suffered legendary hardships and had to be patient for many, many years. So she's saying you are like Job, so you're able to withstand suffering and be patient. So you should give in and let me win, as you are more reasonable than women. So she's brilliant in her persuasive power as usual. Let's go on to the annotation. Yet tickled I his heart, for that he, when that I had of him so great cheerty, I swore that all my walking out by night was for the espy wenches that he died. Under that colour had I many a mirth, for else which wit is given us in our birth. Deceit, weeping, spinning, God hath heaved to woman kindly while that they may live. And thus one thing I have unto me, at the end I had the better in echt degree, by slater or force or by some manners thing, as by continual murmur or grouching. Namely a bed, hadn't they mischance, there would I chide, and do him no pleasance. I would no longer in the bed abide, if I felt his arm over my side, till he had made his ransom unto me, then would I suffer him to do his nicety. Okay, we'll pause there, and then I'll go on to that last line and on to the next page in a moment. So, the tone is lightened for a moment. I tickled his heart, because he believed that I had of him so great affection. He believed I had such great affection for him. So he's flattered by my supposed jealousy, because he thinks my affection for him is so great. I swore that all my walking out at night, by night, was to spy out wenches, women that he had lain with. So, sex with. So I swore, have you been out seeing the women you want to go, etc.? I've been watching out for all the women you... So she pretends that all her affairs, all her flirtations, walking out by night, all her adventures, were because she was keeping an eye out for the woman he's been with. Under that pretence, under that colour, had I many a mirth. I laughed a lot. For all such wit is given us in our birth by our gender. Deceit, weeping, spinning lies, as a spinning, that God hath given to women naturally. And that's a pun. You can't quite see it on the left. It's a pun. Kindly is in their nature, but also play on word mean kindly. So he's given us these gifts while we may live. And it's ironic. These are absolutely anti-woman ideas of the time. She's delighting in her exploits, the idea of Eve, as it says on the red on the top left, the idea of deceptiveness of the gender. And she says that this has been given to women kindly while they may live. And thus of one thing I boast of me. And thus one thing I boast of me. At the end, I had the better in every way. I always won. By sleight or sleight, so trickery, sleight of hand, kind of magic or trickery. That's why we would hear sleight of hand, by the way, but of course this means trickery. By trickery or force or by some such way, as by continual grumbling, murmuring or grouching. Namely in bed they had misfortune. There would I scold, and do them no pleasance. I would now allow no pleasance. I would no longer in the bed stay. I wouldn't abide in the bed if I felt his arm over on my side till he had paid his penalty unto me. Then would I allow him to do his nicety. So she's mocking them. She's saying she got the upper hand by trickery. She always won. And this is a manipulative tool she uses. Of course, this is talking about the favours she does them in bed. So she wins, but does her victory actually bring her happiness? Also, you've got these classic misogynistic ideas of women of the time. And she fulfills that stereotype. Eve was supposed to cause all women sorrow. And what's interesting, of course, the irony is the wife gives most sorrow to her husband. So this is highly ironic, highly amusing, but does play into proverbial anti-woman ideas of the time. And then I'm going to go onto this last line and onto the next page, so you can get ready to turn from page 47 to 48. And therefore every man this tale I tell, win whoso may, for all is for to sell. I'll go from that line into the next. So, and therefore make a profit of you where you can, for everything is for sale. With empty hand men may noon hawk as lure. So she's saying with an empty hand you won't lure a hawk. You should try and get the upper hand, have a full hand so you can lure the hawks. For profit would I all his lust endure, and make me a feigned appetite. And yet in bacon had I never delight, that made me that I ever would him chide. For though the Pope had satten him beside, I would not spare him at his own board. For by my truth I quitte him word for word, as help me very God omnipotent. Though I right now should make my testament, I may owe him not a word that is misquit. I brought it so about by my wit, that they most yieve it up, as for the best, or else had we never been in rest. Okay, so let's go through that. So, profit would, because I gained, for profit, I would all of his lust endure, and I would make a fake appetite. And yet, old meat, bacon, I never delighted in bacon. I did not like them. So of course she faked it. She puts up with their lusts. But she never really liked old meat, the reference to her husband. So she didn't like the advances of that old, but she would put up with it for a price. They made it so that I would always scold them. They made me, that made me that I ever would scold them. Because I had to fake this, it made me that I would always scold them. Even if the Pope sat beside them, so setting him beside, I would not spare them at their own table. You'll know board, because half board, full board, like you would in a hotel, so at the table. I wouldn't even spare them at their own table. I would chide them at their own house, at their own table. I would always be scolding them, even if the Pope was to sit down beside them. And this, of course, does play into the idea of you have the beginning of questioning of medieval church's authority, because this is sacrilegious, heretical, and she's saying that even if the Pope sat down beside them, I wouldn't have stopped my scolding, which is quite shocking. But you can also see the context of the time was that there was the beginning to question the medieval powers of the church. For by my truth, truthfully, I paid them back word for word, as help me very God omnipotent. Though I right now should make my will and testament, I owe them not one word that has not been avenged or repaid. So quit is paid. If I was to make my will now, I owe them not one word that hasn't been avenged. So I've been repaid. I brought it about by my wit that they must give it up for the best. Otherwise we would never have had a rest. So they had to give up their opposition to my mastery. They had to give it up, as for the best. Or else had we never been in rest, we would never have had a rest. For though he looked as a wood leon, ye should he fail of his conclusion. Though he was as mad, remember wood from earlier on with the Chuff is mad, Chuff is wood. For though he was as mad as a lion, he would not get his conclusion, he would not get his way. Then would I say, good life, take keep, how meekly looketh Willikin, our sheep. Come near, my spouse, and let me bar thy cheek. Ye would all patient and meek, and hand as sweet as spiced conscience, sith ye so preach of Job his patience, suffereth always, and ye so well can pray. But ye do certain, we shall you teach, that it is fair to have a wife in peace. Oon of us two most bowen, doubtless, and sith a man is more reasonable than woman is, ye most insufferable. What ails you to grouch thus and groan? It is for ye would have my quaint alone? Yeah, why, take it all, lo, have it every deal. Okay, it's quite a lot here, let's go for it. So, then would I say, sweetheart, take note, how meekly looks Wilkin, our sheep. Come near, my spouse, and let me kiss thy cheek. A bar was a word used to speak to children. Look at the sheep, Wilkin. Oh, he's so meek. Come to me. Let me kiss your cheek like a child. You should be patient and meek, and have such a sweet, scrupulous, tender disposition. Note how I've put in the notes on the right. She's removing their masculinity. Since such you're so like Job's patience. You're so good at preaching about Job's patience. You so well can you preach, unless you do. We shall teach you that it's fair to have a wife in peace. Someone has to give in if we're going to live in peace. Look at the sheep. He's so patient and meek. And you always talk about patience. You should be the patient one. And then she goes on in line 441. And since a man is more reasonable than a woman, you are most able to bear suffering. What ails you to grouch thus and groan? Is it because you would have my quaint alone? And of course this again is reference to the fact that you're the one who you want me all my parts all to yourself. Why, take it all. Have it every deal. Have it every bit. So be docile like a sheep. I've said at the very bottom of the page. If a man is more reasonable, he should give in, and then we'll be at peace. Is it because you want me all for yourself? Why, have it every day. Now she's about to say, if she sold her pretty thing, she would always be in fresh clothes. She would be rich. But she keeps it for him. We've got this continued idea as her body is a transaction. And of course the irony is if she talks about it as if she were a prostitute. So she says, by St. Peter. So she's just finished with, you want my quaint all alone from the previous page. Peter, I shrew you, but ye love it weel. For if I would sell my belly shows, I could walk as fresh as is a rose. But I will keep it for your own tooth. Ye be to blame, by God, I say you sooth. Switch a manner word as had as we on hond. Now will I speak of my fourth husband. Okay, so let's pause there for a moment and just look at this bit. By St. Peter, I would curse you if you didn't love it well. For if I would sell my nice thing, my pretty thing, I could walk as fresh as as newly clothed. I could have as many new clothes as a rose, but I will keep it for your own pleasure. You are to blame, by God, I tell you the truth. Such sort of words had we in hand. Now will I speak of my fourth husband. So we've got this transition. She says if she sold her pretty things, she would always be in fresh clothes, but she's going to keep it for him. You're to blame, I tell you truthfully. These were all the words we had, that had we on hand. Now will I speak of my fourth husband. My fourth husband was a reveller. That is to say, now what's interesting is we've got a thematic bridge between the first three husbands who were easily dominated by her, and her fifth husband, Jankin, who he dominates her. So the first three husbands, she dominated them. The fifth husband, he dominates her. And you have this transition character, her fourth husband. My fourth husband was a reveller. That is to say, he had a paramour, mistress. Stubborn and strong, and jolly as a pie. How could I dance to it half as small, and sing whis as any nightingale, when I had drunk a draught of sweet wine? Metilius, the foul churl, the swine, that with a staff bereft his wife here life, for she drank wine. Though I had a been his wife, he should not have daunted me for drink. And after wine on Venus most, I think, for also sic as could engendreth hail, a lycrus most, han a lycrus tail. In woman vinolent is no defence, this known lecherous by experience. But Lord Christ, when it remembereth me upon my youth, and on my jollity, it tickleth me about mine heart's root, and to this day it doth mine heart boot, that I have had my word as in my time. But age, alas, that all will envison me, hath me bereft my beauty and my pith. Let go, farewell, the devil go therewith. And we'll pause there, and then we'll go back. So where did we get to? So my fourth husband was a reveller. So she's described the fourth husband, the first of her two bad husbands. So what's interesting is he's not under her control. He has a paramour. And she makes him jealous, not through adultery. She says in, just so you know, over the page on line 485, it's not through adultery, but she does flirt with other men. And she's careful to avoid the outright admission that she is adulterous. She justifies her treatment by saying he was a reveller. She doesn't have any sorrow at his death. She says that on line 500. Is nis but was to bury him preciously. So she's quite comically callous. But most marriages of the time were for economic rather than romantic reasons. And we continually have this idea of mastery, her wanting to get mastery over her husband. My fourth husband was a reveller. Let's go through it now. That is to say, he had a mistress. And I was young and full of raggery playfulness. I may have missed that, by the way. I was young and full of playfulness, stubborn and strong, and jolly as a magpie, so talkative. That is to say, he had a mistress. I was young, full of playfulness, stubborn, strong, and jolly as a talkative, like a magpie. How I could dance to a small harp and sing truly as any nightingale when I had drunk a draught of sweet wine. Now this is a Roman story. Roman stories by Valerius Maximus. I think you can see it on the left-hand side. Valerius Maximus, a man who beat his wife to death. Metellus, that foul churl, the swine, that with a staff bereft his wife her life, so murdered her, deprived his wife of her life, because she drank wine. If I had been his wife, he would not have frightened me away from the drink. And after wine, on Venus must I think. When I've had wine, I think about sex. For as surely as cold brings on hail, a gluttonous mouth must have a lecherous tail. In woman drunken, there's no defence. There's no drunken woman who can defend her honour. If you're drunk, you can't defend your honour. Lechers know this by experience. She's happy with her life. She says, as surely as cold brings on hail, as surely as when you've had drink, you're driven by Venus. If you're drunk, you can't defend your honour. Lechers know this by experience. But Lord Christ, when I remember my youth and my gaiety, it tickles me to the bottom of my heart, to the root of my heart, like that phrase, to the bottom of my heart. Unto this day, it does my heart good that I have had my world as in my time. I'm glad I had the world in my time. But age, alas, that will poison, has bereft, so links back to 461, you can see, has bereft my beauty and my vigour. So age that will poison has deprived me of beauty and my vigour. Key quotation here. But let go, farewell. The devil go with therewith, so the devil go with it. Oh well, goodbye. The devil go with it. So she's really optimistic. This is so different from Lavielle, so different from the Lavielle tradition. And that's really important. This shows that, yes, she's aware. Her youth is gone. The flower is gone, as she's about to say. There's no more to tell. But, hey-ho, let's move on. The devil's gone with it. The flower is gone. There is no more to tell. The bren, as best I can, now must I sell. But yet to be right merry will I fond. Now will I tell of my fourth husband. I say, I had it in heart a great despite, that he of any other had delight. But when he was quit, by God and by St. Jos, I made of him the same wood across. Not of my body in no foul manner, but certainly I made folk switch cheer, that in his own grease I made him fry for anger and for very jealousy. By God, in earth I was his purgatory, for which I hope his soul be in glory. For God it would, he sat full oft and song, when that his shoe full bitterly him wrong. There was no wight save God, and he that wist in many wise how saw I him twist. He died when I came from Jerusalem, and lieth a grave under the rude beam. All his tomb not so curious, as was the sepulchre of him Darius, which that Apelles wrought subtilty. It is but waste to bury him preciously. Let him farewell, God give his soul a rest. He is now in his grave and in his chest. Okay, so let's go through that. So, she's just finished by saying that she's lost her beauty, but let go, farewell. The flower. Now, flower, the last line of the previous plane, flower, as in, it's a pun on flower, as in Flower, but also the flower is gone. So she's got a pun there, which goes into the next page. The flower is gone. There is no more to tell. The bran, now that her youth is gone, she must sell herself as well as she can as bran. So she's no longer the white bread, she's the bran. The bran, as best I can, I now must sell. But yet, to be a right merry I will try to be merry. So I will try to be merry. Now I'll tell about my fourth husband. As I was saying, I had in heart great despite. I was very angry that he had delight in any other. She's jealous. But he was paid back. So he was paid back by God. I made him of the same wood a cross of the same wood. So she paid him back for his infidelity. Not by being unfaithful, not of my body, no, in no foul manner, but certainly I made folk such cheer. I was so friendly with everyone, that in his own grease I made him fry for anger and for pure jealousy. So it's kind of like an idiomatic phrase, I made him stew in his own juice with jealousy. I was so friendly with everyone that he was stewed in his own juice, so he became jealous. Now this is a joke that she's about to go on to do. Anti-feminine writers said that marriage was like purgatory, a place between life and death, where sinful souls could be saved from damnations. Cross-reference, do have a look at your notes at this bit after we've finished. By God, in earth I was his purgatory, I was his torment, for which I hope his soul is in glory. I hope his soul is in glory now, because his life was a torment. For God, he knows. He sat full often and sang how his shoe pinched him most painfully. There was the person who knew it except God and he. In many ways, how painfully I twisted him, how painfully I tortured him. He died when I returned from Jerusalem. So she was away when he died. Pilgrimage in Jerusalem. She made him miserable. No one knew about his pain other than God and I. And yes, I tortured him. He died while I was away at my pilgrimage, and he lies buried under the rood, which is a crucifix beam, and his tomb. So I'll just talk about this. I think it's in your note. Yes, it is. So this is a beam of timber spanning a chancel arch in a church. Now, what's interesting is to be in the chancel would be more expensive. So he's under the arch. He's in a cheaper place to be buried. He lies buried under the rood beam, although his tomb is not so elaborate as was the sepulchre of him Darius, which Apollos wrought skillfully. It's nothing but waste to bury him expensively. Let him go well. God give his soul rest. He's now in his grave and in his casket. So we've got this continued theme of mastery. She's remembered her youth, vitality and passion. She would dance, sing, drink and make love. And of course the making love was apparently inevitable effect of her drink. Her youth has passed away. She doesn't have any regrets. But her fourth husband is not an altogether happy memory. He was unfaithful, so she made him jealous. So she made his life miserable. And now he's buried in a cheap tomb. It's interesting, we've got this kind of triumphant mastery of the first three husbands, and then this kind of transition between the first three and the fifth. And we've got this melancholy atmosphere. What is interesting is that she has no regrets, which is different from Lavielle. Her optimism is a great quality of hers, and it does triumph. She is continually less she's not a one-dimensional stereotypical figure. She has fun and spirit, but she does show her real grace in the way she's accepting passing of time and her youth passing away. At least she's vulnerable, but only for a few moments. And she's about to go on and tell of her fifth husband, Jankin. He was the cruelest of the five, and she bears the damage that he had over her.